so long since we were together, I felt like I probably needed to do a little bit of a reintroduction to the subject. And I have kind of a natural lead into it because I've been communicating with a young lady who shall remain nameless, mainly by text. But her New Year's resolution was to spend time every day in the Word. And so she's talked to me about some guidance as to, how to read the Bible, how to study the Bible, and those kinds of things. But in knowing my background, knowing my history, she made this statement early on, I'm not into apologetics, so I just want you to help me, know how to read the Bible, study the Bible. So I said, okay. So we texted back and forth for a couple of days. I gave her some suggestions, told her about, just don't get in a hurry. Take your time. Don't be in such a hurry to check off, I read that book, that you're not taking time to hear what the Holy Spirit is saying to you from that book. And then I said, I want you to read this one verse of Scripture when you get a chance, and after you've had a chance to read it and think about it a little bit, tell me what it's saying to you. So I said, I want you to read 1 Peter 3:15, which says,
always be ready to give an answer. The hope lies in you.
That's right.
Do so with meekness.
Yep. Sanctify the Lord God in your heart. Always be ready to give an answer. So I told her, I said, read this and then tell me what you think. And so she texted me. She goes, I love that verse. She goes, that's going to be one of my life verses. That is so, especially the meekness and I love that verse. I said, good. Where it says give an answer back, that's the Greek word apologia, from which we get the word apologetics. So apparently you really are into apologetics after all. And she was shocked. She said, I think my idea of apologetics was two people sitting on a stage arguing, yes. And I said that can come across that way because we find that a lot. But the reality of apologetics is just that. Sanctify the Lord God in your heart. Be ready to give an answer to everyone that asks of the hope that lies within you. I may have told you this story before. If I have, you can hear it again because you probably would have forgotten it anyway. And if you haven't, then that's good. But I was on an airplane one time. And I'm seated, I'm on the aisle seat. There's a gentleman next to me, and at the window seat there's a young lady. And they're discussing life after death. And they're making the bold statement that I don't believe in life after death. And so, uninvited, I joined their conversation. I said, I'm sorry, I couldn't help it over here, which said, so you don't eat? He goes, what? I said, you don't eat? He goes, well, of course I eat. I'm confused. You said you don't believe in life after death. But now you tell me that you eat. He goes, well, yeah, what's one have to do with the other thing? I said, when you plant a seed in the ground, until that seed dies, it cannot produce anything, cannot produce food for you to eat. So if you tell me that you eat, you do believe in life after death. And he was so impressed, turned his back to me, looked at the young lady and never looked at me again. And I said, Lord, what meaneth this? And he said, he did not ask you anything. Oh, yeah. Be ready to give an answer to those that ask. Reading through the scripture one time, one of my favorite Bible characters, Peter. Foot and mouth Peter. Stand up when everybody else is sitting down, Peter. And I read this, I kept coming across this phrase. It said, Peter answered them and said. Peter answered them and said. And I went back, and nobody was asking him anything. He's answering questions that nobody's asking, which is what I was doing on the airplane that day. And the Holy Spirit said, always be ready to give an answer to those that ask of the hope that lies within you. If they're not asking, unsolicited advice is usually unwanted advice. Right? So those of you who have kids know that's the truth. Selah. All right. We began We began a couple times ago talking about the difference between chance and design. You remember that? Difference between chance and design. Chance, of course, would be Darwinism, and design is the master creator, intelligent design. So you'll hear that phrase a lot these days in academia, and it's usually said in a very negative or derogatory way, intelligent design. So I want to continue. And you remember when we first started this class back in, what was it, 2019 or whatever that was? I told you that, well, you guys are not with it this morning. That's supposed to be funny, y'all. It was last year, 2022, we started the class, not 2019. Okay, good.
I was thinking, what?
No, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, that's right. What was your name again? What was my name again? Okay, I'm going to go out and come back in. One of the things I told you I was going to do, because there's so much involved in the study of apologetics that you can't possibly know it all. I mean, you spend a lifetime of studying to know this stuff. So one of my objectives, one of the things I told you that I was going to do to help you in that process, is to introduce you to 18 absolute brainiacs that only Christopher in this room could identify with. But, you know, the people that are really smart in their area of endeavor. And so what I've done that as we've gone through this. And I'm going to do that some more today. I'm going to introduce you to some people. And not going to spend a lot of time except give you some of their qualifications and background. This first guy, if this is working now. Okay, it's Guillermo Gonzalez. Let me just tell you a little bit about Guillermo. He was born in Havana, Cuba. He's an astrophysicist. I got to stop for a second. I experienced the weirdest thing last week watching professional football. Tennessee Titans. You guys familiar with Tennessee Titans? Their quarterback went down a few weeks ago, so they've been trying some backup quarterbacks. And they brought in this young man for last week's the first time he ever started a professional football game. And I thought, I don't know anything about this guy. So I did a little research on him. He's playing for Tennessee. He also went to school in Tennessee. His name is Dobbs. He's a legitimate, bona fide rocket scientist. He's playing professional football. I looked up his stats. He is an astrophysicist. He got a 4.0 at the University of Tennessee, got his doctorate there. He's we talk about, well, that's not rocket science. Well, it is for him. This guy's a legitimate rocket scientist, and he's playing football. Of course, he probably makes more money playing football, but I just smart. Don't scramble your brains. So Guillermo Gonzalez, astrophysicist, he's a proponent of intelligent design. Won't take a lot of time to read that. You guys can look him up for yourself. But because he's a proponent of intelligent design, and he works heavily in that field, some of the people we've looked at recently are, and some others, because he works heavily in that field, when he was due for tenure at the university where he, at Iowa State University, he's been a teaching professor there, he was due for tenure. 100 and something of his colleagues wrote a letter opposing his tenure because he believes in intelligent design. What happened to free thinking in academia? You're free to think whatever you want to, as long as it's what we want you to think. Right? He was denied tenure. He did nothing wrong. He hadn't violated his school's policies, hadn't committed any egregious crimes out in the marketplace, but he was denied tenure because he refused to back off from intelligent design. Another young man that, that he worked with is Jay Richards. Jay Richards. He has a PhD in philosophy and theology from Princeton Seminary. Just smart Alex. Teaching fellow, currently is a research fellow and director of media at the Action Institute in Grand Rapids, Michigan. His master's thesis treated philosopher of science Michael Polanyi. He was executive and associate editor of the Princeton Theological Review. He also is an advocate of intelligent design. I'm going to talk to you about them in a little bit, about a book that these guys co-wrote together. We'll get to that in a minute. This guy, anybody recognize that picture? Anybody know who that is? I think most of you will when I tell you his name. That's Copernicus. Okay? Copernicus. He lived 1473 to 1543. He was the first astronomer. He was the first astronomer to formulate a scientifically based heliocentric cosmology. Anybody know what that means? Helio. Sun. Who said it? Sun. Yeah. Prior to his time, the world believed that everything revolved around the earth. And he's the first one that came along and said, yeah, that just doesn't work for me. And he's the one that came up with the heliocentric cosmology. That means the earth is not the center of the universe, but the sun is the center, not of the universe, but of our galaxy. Right? It got him banned from the church. Yeah. His book, demonstrating the motion of celestial objects, could be explained without putting the earth at rest at the center of the universe, stimulated further scientific investigation. It became a landmark in the history of modern science. That is known as the Copernican Revolution. So much changed in science because of his discovery that the sun is the center of our galaxy, not the earth, not the earth. Caused him no small amount of trouble. That's a galaxy. I'm going to show you a number of different ones. We're talking about intelligent design versus chance. So the next is the evidence of astronomy. Astronomy leads us to, not astrology, y'all. You know the difference between astronomy and astrology? Huh? Do I have any of these? Okay. I have at least one. What is astrology? Anybody?
It has to do with what star you were born under. It's the zodiac, the 12.
Okay. 12 signs of the zodiac. Do we believe in astrology? Go like this. It's a universal sign for no. We do not believe in astrology. That's not scientific, and it's certainly not Christian. You go to the paper in the morning to see what your sign is for the day. Oh, I shouldn't have got out of bed today. My planets aren't lined up right for me to do anything today. That's astrology. We're talking about astronomy. It's the study of the heavens, okay? Cosmology. Astronomy, he says, leads us to a unique event, a universe which was created out of nothing, one with very delicate balance needed to provide exactly the conditions required to permit life, and one which has an underlying, one might say, supernatural plan. Ooh, sounds like intelligent design. Contrast that with a statement of the late astronomer Carl Sagan, who said there's nothing unusual about the Earth. It's an average, unassuming rock that's spinning mindlessly around an unremarkable star in a run-of-the-mill galaxy, a lone speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. Copernicus comes along, Polish astronomer, made discovery that rocked the world of his day. But he also said that there was nothing particularly special about the earth. So along comes Jay Richards and Guillermo Gonzalez, and he co-wrote a book called The Privileged Planet. In this book, they document the astonishing evidence pointing toward a designer for Earth. They describe what it means to be in a safe zone. Listen to their fascinating explanation of why the Copernican principle simply is not true. They weren't denying the fact that it's a heliocentric. They were denying what he was saying about the Earth not having anything special about it. Okay? That's the part that they're talking about. First, there are three types of galaxies. Spiral galaxies like our own, elliptical galaxies which are sort of egg-shaped, and irregular galaxies which appear disorganized and distorted. Only spiral galaxies are conducive to life. Also, the location within the galaxy is important. The nucleus of the galaxy is very dangerous, and the Earth is very far from the nucleus, but not too far out. And the thin disk of our galaxy helps our sun stay in its desirable circular orbit. All of this works together to create a narrow, safe zone where life-sustaining planets are possible. Within our own solar system, we are strategically placed. We are exactly where we need to be in relation to the sun. Listen to this. If we were 5% closer, the oceans would boil. If we were 5% farther away, the oceans would freeze. The planet would be uninhabitable. Furthermore, we're in a circular orbit, which is also a must. If our orbit were elliptical, we would get too close to the sun at times and too far away at others. Again, the planet would be uninhabitable. And it turns out that the moon isn't just for the poets. In addition to taking hits from asteroids that would otherwise hit the Earth, it is also largely responsible for controlling the oceanic tides on Earth. And as recently as 1993, that's in most of our lifetimes. Now you guys. It was discovered that the moon stabilizes the tilt of the Earth's axis, which is responsible for our seasons. The moon, quote, just happens to be in the right size, in the right place, to help create a habitable environment for Earth. Let's move out away from the Earth for just a minute and take a look at our neighborhood. Our Earth is one of 9 planets in our solar system. Now they tell us there's only 8. Poor Mercury. Our sun is one of between 200 and 400 billion stars in our galaxy. Our galaxy is 100,000 light years across. A light year is the distance light travels in 1 year, which is approximately 6 trillion miles. The Earth is 93 million miles from the sun, and in light terms, that would be about 8 minutes. The distance across our galaxy would be about 6 with 21 zeros after it. Our galaxy is one of about 100 billion galaxies in the known universe. And while our galaxy is 100,000 light years across, the universe is about 13 billion light years across. Someone once told me that they hoped when we got to heaven we'd be able to travel at the speed of light. 186,000 miles per second. I said, that would be way too slow. At 186,000 miles per second, it would take you 13 billion years to cross the universe. I want to go investigate. Traveling at the speed of light is just way too slow, y'all. Instead, we're going to travel at the speed of thought. That's why I wish I could do that on Highway 5. Huh? Yeah. Yellow Porsche.
Oh, there we go.
Listen to how O'Keefe sums it all up. We are by astronomical standards a pampered, cherished group of creatures. Our Darwinian claim to have done it all ourselves is as ridiculous and charming as a baby's brave efforts to stand on his own feet and refuse his mother's hand. If the universe had not been made with the most exacting precision, we could never have come into existence. It's my view that these circumstances indicate the universe was created for man to live in. me show you some of the galaxies. Oh, there's our solar system. Poor Mercury, not there anymore. Okay. This is Robin Collins, American philosopher who is currently a professor of philosophy at Messiah College in Grantham, Pennsylvania. His main interests include issues in science and religion. Collins received a PhD in philosophy from the University of Notre Dame. Alvin Plantinga. I've not heard that name in a long time. Alvin Plantinga. God does a weird thing with me. Every once in a while, I'll wake up in the morning with just a single word in my mind. And I don't always know what it is or why I'm thinking about it. And this is the case with Alvin Plantinga. I woke up one morning when we lived in Phoenix, Arizona. I woke up one morning with the name Plantinga. I didn't even get the Alvin, so I don't know what a Plantinga is. I don't know if it's a person or some strange plant or something. You know, okay, God, what are you saying to me? What is this? So I had to do a little research. Found out who Alvin Plantinga is, and it turns out that he had written a book on epistemology that I really desperately needed to read. And I got the book because I woke up one morning thinking about Alvin Plantinga, a name I had never heard before. Never heard before. All right, we're going to move on to the evidence of physics. This is one of my favorites. This stuff can warp your brain. It can get really deep, really fast. So if you're not catching all of it, don't worry about it. Okay? I'm not a physicist. When I began studying physics and understand some of the properties of our universe, had my mind completely blown. Patrick Glenn, who's assistant director of the George Washington University Institute for Communitarian Policy Studies in Washington, D.C., first encountered evolutionary theory while a student at a parochial school and immediately recognized that it was incompatible with the Bible and stood up in class and told the poor nun as such. Convinced that reason was the only path to truth, he became a confirmed atheist by the time he received his doctorate from Harvard in the 70s. Quote, Darwin had demonstrated that it was not even necessary to posit a God to explain the origin of life. He said life in human species itself was the outcome of essentially random mechanisms operating over the eons. After more than 20 years of study, he said, today it seems to me there's no reason for an intelligent person to embrace the illusion of atheism or agnosticism to make the same intellectual mistakes I made. The principle Glenn learned is that all seemingly arbitrary and unrelated constants in physics have one strange thing in common. They are precisely the values you need if you want to have a universe capable of producing life. Random. Walter Bradley, co-author of The Mystery of Life's Origin, said it's quite easy to understand why so many scientists have changed their minds in the past 30 years, agreeing that the universe cannot reasonably be explained as a cosmic accident. Evidence for an intelligent designer becomes more compelling the more we understand about the carefully crafted habitat. Robin Williams, who we just talked about, earned his doctorate in physics from the University of Texas, loves to talk about the fine-tuning of the universe. He said that when scientists talk about fine-tuning, they're generally referring to the extraordinary balancing of the fundamental laws and parameters of physics and the initial conditions of the universe. Our minds can't comprehend the precision of them, he said. And I'm thinking, if he's a physicist and he can't comprehend them, then I'm in serious trouble. He goes on to say that the result is a universe that has just the right conditions to sustain life. Collins said, over the past 30 years or so, scientists have discovered just about everything about the basic structure of the universe is balanced on a razor's edge in order for life to exist. The coincidences are far too fantastic to attribute this to mere chance or to claim that it needs no explanation. The dials are set too precisely to have been a random accident. In his explanation of the fine-tuning, he acknowledged that physics can get very complicated very quickly, so he began with an example that's easier to envision. Let's talk about gravity, he said. Imagine a ruler that goes all the way across the universe. It'd be a big ruler. It would be broken down into 1-inch increments, which means that there would be billions upon billions upon billions of inches. The entire dial represents the range of force strengths in nature, with gravity being the weakest force and a strong nuclear force being the strongest. Now let's imagine if you want to move the dial from where it's currently set, even if you were to move it by only 1 inch. Are you getting this picture? I know I'm just doing a lot of reading, a lot of words here. The pictures you got all the way across the universe, you got a ruler stretched out. Billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of inches. He said if you were to decide that you want to change the dial, if you move it 1 inch, the impact on life in the universe would be catastrophic. That small adjustment of the dial would increase gravity by 1 billion-fold. Animals anywhere near the size of humans would be crushed. The earth would be reduced in size to about 40 feet in diameter if you changed the dial 1 inch out of the billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of inches if you change it 1 inch. The second example he gave is called the cosmological constant. Is defined as the energy density of empty space. This constant is part of Albert Einstein's equation for general relativity. He added that the fine-tuning is so precise that there's no way we can really comprehend it. The fine-tuning has conservatively, the numbers they throw out here just rattle my brain. The fine-tuning has conservatively been estimated to be at least 1 part in 100 million, billion, 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 billion. That would be 10 followed by 53 zeros. He said, let me give you an example of that. Let's say you're way out in space and you're going to throw a dart at random toward the earth. It would be like successfully hitting a bullseye that's 1/trillionth of a trillionth of an inch. That's less than the size of a single atom. Collins said if the cosmological constant were the only example of fine-tuning, this would be sufficient by itself to strongly establish design. If you combine the two, the fine-tuning would be to a precision of 1 part in 100 million, trillion, 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 trillion. Chance? Think we're here by chance? Does this not scream intelligent design? I'll give you one more example. This is my favorite. Oxford physicist Roger Penrose said, one parameter, the original space volume, required fine-tuning to an accuracy of 1 part in 10 billion multiplied by itself 123 times. So just for fun, I worked that out to 30 places. That means you would still have to multiply my results itself another 93 times. Just out 30 places, you'd have a number that was 1 followed by 10 billion, 737,418,254 zeros. Penrose said that it would be impossible to write the number down in full because it would require more zeros than the number of elementary particles in the universe. You couldn't even write the number down. It would be impossible to write it because of all the zeros it would take. Not enough elementary particles in the universe to write that number down. And Darwinists want you to believe that it all just happened. Just strictly by chance. Right? Random. The conclusion of all these renowned scientists is that postulating the existence of a supermind is the explanation for the fine-tuning of the universe makes all the sense in the world. Collins concluded his discussion by saying, God doesn't usually appear supernaturally somewhere and say, here I am. He uses preachers to bring people his message of redemption through Christ. And sometimes he uses natural means. Romans 1:20 tells us that God's eternal power and divine nature can be seen and understood through the things that are made. And this is the reason humanity is without excuse. I see physics as uncovering the evidence of God's fingerprint at a deeper and more subtle level than enabled me to see the evidence of his presence and creative ability. The heavens really do declare the glory of God, even more so for someone trained with physics for the eye to see. Have we fried your brain yet? That's Michael Behe. He's an American biochemist, an intelligent design advocate, professor of biochemistry at Lehigh University in Pennsylvania, senior fellow of the Discovery Institute Center for Science and Culture. He advocates the idea that some structures are too complex at the biochemical level to be adequately explained as a result of evolutionary mechanisms. He has termed this concept irreducible complexity. Irreducible complexity. That right there is an example of irreducible complexity. Darwin's whole claim for Darwinism was that everything can be explained by small changes to get to the place where we ended up. And he made the statement himself that if it cannot be explained by that, then his theory doesn't work. Something as simple as an old-fashioned mousetrap is an example of irreducible complexity. This could not have come into existence by slight modifications, a little bit of a change. You have all of those parts all at the same time, or the thing doesn't work at all. Or it doesn't work at all. That's an example of irreducible complexity. Oh, this is cool. You may know what that is? It's not grass, not weeds. Huh? You're close. It's cilia. You know what cilia is? It's Latin for eyelash. These tiny protuberances on single cells organisms wave like hairs to move the cell around or something around the cell. They are responsible for protecting us from germs in our lungs and pushing an ovum down the fallopian tube. That little thing right there. Huh?
Not spaghetti.
That's right. That's a bacterial flagellum. This is known as the world's smallest motor. World's most efficient motor. It was discovered in 1973. Darwin wrote in the early 1800s. He really didn't have a chance. This motor is known as flagellum. It's used to move cells. The flagellum has a propeller that's long and whip-like. It's attached to a drive shaft by a hook protein which acts as a universal joint, allowing the propeller to drive shaft rotate freely. The propeller can spin at 10,000 RPM, can stop spinning in 1/4 of a turn, and instantly go the other way at 10,000 RPM. Here's the real kicker. This whole deal is about 2 microns. In case you're wondering, a micron is about 1/20,000th of an inch. The motor itself is about 1/100,000th of an inch. And even with all of our technology, we can't begin to create something like this. That's in you. All in you. Everywhere. Michael Behe was taught in parochial school that God had set up the universe and knew what was going to happen, intended for life to come into existence, but from our perspective, the entire process unfolded through Darwinian evolution. That pretty much satisfied the young Behe. Later, as a student in biochemistry, when he would encounter enormously complicated biological systems, his response was to scratch his head and say, Wonder how evolution created that. Well, somebody must know. He always moved on, assuming someone did. Then one day, while doing postdoctorate research on DNA, he and a colleague were pondering what it would take for life to begin by naturalistic processes. As they enumerated the components that would be needed, proteins, a genetic code, a membrane, so on, they looked at each other and said, nah. They knew there was no way life could have sprung into existence unaided. Seeds of skepticism were planted. So Michael Behe wrote a book entitled Darwin's Black Box. It was catapulted into national spotlight. The black box's title is a term scientists use when describing a system or machine that they find interesting, but they don't know how it works. For most of us, a computer is a black box. We use them. We don't have the foggiest idea how they work. And to Darwin, the cell was a black box. Most scientists believe that the deeper they delved into the cell, the simpler it would become. But the opposite has turned out to be true. Darwin's own test proves to be his undoing. In his Origin of the Species, he said if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous, successive, slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. I mean, we could quit right here and have more than enough information. Life is actually based on molecular machines. He said they haul cargo from one place in the cell to another. They turn cellular switches on and off. They act as pulleys and cables. Electrical machines like current flow through the nerves. Manufacturing machines build other. This is all happening inside your cells, people. Solar-powered machines capture the energy from light and store it in chemicals. Molecular machinery lets cells move, reproduce, and process food. In fact, every part of the cell's function is controlled by complex, highly complicated machines. The flagellum motor is one of them. One more irreducibly complex system. Owie. I should have put my picture up there when I ripped the end of my. When I ripped the end. No. she's seen the picture when a couple of years ago I got my finger caught in a chain and it's not good. Little side note. I wanted to work in the children's department here. Not all the time, but to be able to help. In our current state of world affairs, in order to work with children, you have to be background check.
Life scan.
What's that?
Life scan.
Yep, life scan. You have to be fingerprinted. They couldn't do me because of ripping the end of my finger off. I don't have a fingerprint there anymore. They kept trying it over and over again, and they finally had to go to some other means in order to determine that I was okay because I don't have a fingerprint on that finger anymore. You know I'm a veteran. Oh, you guys didn't see my new hat I got for Christmas. Jan bought it for me. I should have brought it. She bought a matching one for herself. You guys have seen I wear a lot. Every day I go out, I usually wear a Vietnam hat because it opens up conversation. I have people come and talk to me all the time. And it got me into the public school in winters because of it. Got to go in and talk to the history classes. And yeah, you guys came. Some of you came. So I wear these hats all the time. You know, they got different things. One's the Purple Heart hat. One's my unit that I was with and all that. Well, I got a new one for Christmas. It says disgruntled veteran, dysfunctional veteran. Oh, I was going to say it wasn't me, was it? Dysfunctional veteran, leave me alone. She got a matching one. It says dysfunctional veteran's wife, leave me alone. I was in the bank the other day and somebody said, where did you get that? I want to get one for my dad. Anyway, the reason I started telling that story, because I'm a part of the VA, they take care of me, my physical needs. Right? If I have an accident or anything, I'm supposed to go to a VA facility, unless I'm out of area. If I'm in an area where they don't have one, then I go to the nearest medical facility. I just have to let them know within 24 hours what I did. So we were down in Turlock when this happened. when I ripped the end of my finger off. And so I was in the middle of a project. I had to finish it. Christopher will be able to know exactly what I'm talking about.
Right.
Yeah, because he did it. I was in the middle of a project, had to get it finished. And so when it happened, I went in and told Janet, I said, I hurt myself bad. You got to patch me up because I got to keep working. And so she bandaged me all up, and I finished the job I was on. And she goes, okay, we need to change the bandage, but it wouldn't come off. And she said, you're going to the hospital. So we went to the hospital, and they took me into the ER, and it looked a little worse than that. And they fixed it up, and the doctor said, I'm not going to sew you up because I don't know how to sew a hamburger. But they cleaned it up and patched me up and sent me on my way. $6,000.
Whoa.
That's what the emergency room stuff cost. The doctor and cleanup of patch my finger, $6,000. I didn't pay any of it, but you guys did. Yeah, that's all. Only a doctor would say something like that. He goes, that's all? Anyway, this is another example of irreducible complexity. System that saves your life. It's called blood clotting. The system of blood clotting involves a highly choreographed cascade of 10 steps that use about 20 different molecular components. Without the whole system in place, it doesn't work. The real trick with blood clotting isn't so much the clot itself, but it's the regulation of the system. If you make a clot in the wrong place, say the brain or lung, you die. Yeah, you die.
Sorry.
If you make a clot 20 minutes after all the blood has drained from your body, you die. If the blood clot isn't confined to the cut, your entire blood system might solidify and you die. There you go. You guys are getting it. If you make a blood clot that doesn't cover the entire length of the cut, you die. To create a perfectly balanced blood clotting system, clusters of protein components have to be inserted all at once. That rules out Darwin and Haller's design. There have been many attacks on Behe's book, but it stood up to every challenge. Even Darwinists in their quiet moments admit they do not have an answer for irreducible complexity. Mr. Doctor, do you know what that is? Anybody can read the words. I thought you'd know what it is. It's called the laminin. Laminins are major proteins in the basal lamina, also called the basement membrane, which is a protein network foundation for most cells and organs. The laminins are important and biologically active part of the basal lamina, influencing cell differentiation, migration, adhesion, as well as phenotype and survival. The trimeric proteins form across, giving a structure that can bind to other cell membranes and extracellular matrix molecules. The three shorter arms are particularly good at binding to other laminin molecules, which allows them to form sheets. The longer arm is capable of binding to cells, which helps anchor organized tissue cells to the membrane. The laminins are a family of glycoproteins that are an integral part of the structural scaffolding in almost every tissue of an organism. Laminin is vital for the maintenance and survival of tissues. What's that look like, y'all? Your body is full of those. Everything in your body is screaming creator, creator. They all hook together to do what they're supposed to do. Your body is made up of crosses. Your body is made up of crosses. You ought to be excited about that.
Yours, what's that called again?
Laminin. 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 Okay. Who do I have here next? Stephen Meyer. I want to talk with him.
Yes, sir.
Okay, the next is the evidence of biological information. A few more minutes. Warp your brain for a few more minutes. We'll quit. In 1953, when Francis Crick told his wife that he and a colleague had discovered the secret of life, the chemical structure of DNA, she didn't believe him. Years later, she confessed to her husband, "You were always coming home saying things like that." So naturally, I thought nothing of it. This time, he wasn't kidding. He and his partner, James Watson, would win the Nobel Prize for discovering the now famous double helix of deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA. Everybody knows about DNA. Where the language of life is stored. For more than 50 years. There you go. Scientists have studied the 6 feet of DNA that's tightly coiled inside every one of our body's 100 trillion cells. The astounding capacity of microscopic DNA to harbor this mountain of information, carefully spelled out in a 4-letter chemical alphabet, vastly exceeds that of other known systems. The geneticist Michael Denton, DNA serves as the information storehouse for a finely choreographed manufacturing process. It was this absolutely mind-boggling procedure that helped lead biology professor Dean Kenyon to repudiate the conclusions of his own book on the chemical origin of life and conclude instead that nothing short of intelligence, could have created this intricate cellular apparatus. It seemed fitting that when scientists announced in 2003 they had finally mapped the 3 billion codes of the human genome, a project that filled the equivalent of 75,490 pages of the New York Times, divine references abounded. It was said that while scientists were learning the language in which God created life, while geneticist Francis Collins, head of the Human Genome Project, said DNA was our instruction book, previously known only to God. Stephen Meyer, picture we just had up there, says the detailed information recorded in the 4-letter code of DNA, A, G, C, and T, is precisely arranged in order to create protein structure and folding that have caused all naturalistic accounts of the origin of life to break down. Because it's the critical and foundational question. If you can't explain where information comes from, you haven't explained life. If you can't explain where the information comes from, you haven't explained life. Because it's the information that makes the molecules into something that actually functions. In 1871, Charles Darwin wrote that life might have originated when a protein compound was chemically formed in some warm little pond with all sorts of ammonia and phosphoric salts, light, heat, electricity, etc. present. A few years ago, a scientist summarized the basic theory like this. The first stage on the road to life is presumed to have been the buildup by pure chemical synthetic processes occurring on the surface of the early earth of all the basic organic compounds necessary for the formation of a living cell. These are supposed to have accumulated in the primeval oceans, creating a nutrient broth, the so-called prebiotic soup. In certain specialized environments, these organic compounds were assembled into large macromolecules, proteins, nucleic acids. Eventually, over millions of years, combinations of these macromolecules occurred which were endowed with the property of self-reproduction, then driven by natural selection, ever more efficient and complex self-reproducing molecular system involved until the first simple cell system emerged. This is what they're teaching in our public schools. This is what they want you to believe. When asked how much evidence there was for the existence of this soup, Meyer said, none. None. Considering the way the prebiotic soup is referred to in so many discussions of the origin of life as an already established reality, it comes as something of a shock to realize that there's absolutely no positive evidence for its existence. It's interesting to note that while virtually all origin of life experts have utterly rejected the random chance approach to life, it is still very much alive in its popularity. Well, this is where your kids are and where you are. Imagine trying to reproduce a simple book like Shakespeare's Hamlet by throwing a large bag of Scrabble letters on the floor. No matter how many times you throw the letters, it's not going to happen. But that's precisely what they want you to believe. That if you just toss them out there often enough, it's going to happen. That's how life came into being. They just kept trying it over and over and over and over and over and over again. And for so many years, we've bought into it. They said given enough millions and millions of years and enough chances, the human genome would magically appear. You can take a zoo full of monkeys and sit them down at typewriters and let them type away for eternity, and they're never going to produce War and Peace. The evidence makes a convincing case that intelligence and intelligence alone can explain the presence of precise information within genetic material. By itself, this is impressive evidence for the existence of a designer of life. Myers concludes, I think the information revolution taking place in biology is sounding the death knell for Darwinism and chemical evolution theories. Information is the hallmark of the mind, and purely from the evidence of genetics and biology, we can infer the existence of a mind that's far greater than our own, a conscious, purposeful, rational, intelligent designer who's amazingly creative. There is no getting around it. I think I'm going to stop here. I'm telling you, this stuff will warp your brain. But you don't have to understand all of it to recognize the significance of what's being said here. Intelligent design. Cost a man his tenure. It cost, we saw in that video that we watched that day that didn't work very well in our system. But it cost a lot of people their jobs in academia, simply for mentioning the possibility of intelligent design. The enemy's in a panic mode because the more information that's out there, the more knowledge that's out there as to the reality and the truth of these things, when you have all these brilliant people that are going, nah, that couldn't have happened. That's what they want us to believe. That's what we've been believing. That's what we've been teaching all this time, that just random chance caused all these things to happen. Nah. His name is Jesus. My Bible says all things were made by him, and without him, nothing has been made that was made. It all points to him. The reason we're doing this is to point to him. This information is fun. This stuff can warp your mind, but it's enjoyable. But if we do anything other than point to him, then it's of no value. It's all about him. And these things, this kind of information, and having people that are experts in these areas that you can look to, that you can do research with, enables you to do one thing: be ready to give an answer to every one of the hope that lies within. Ask of the hope that lies within you. Right? Be prepared. So when somebody asks you, "How can you believe that?" Say, "Well, let me show you this book. Let me tell you what this guy. Look at this. This is a scientist. You like science, right? This is a scientist. This is what this guy said." Right? I've read the last page of the book. We win. We win.